The twin suns of Zerath cast an otherworldly crimson glow across the endless dunes. Red Arc Sand, as the locals called it, stretched to the horizon in all directions, interrupted only by the occasional rock formation and the small, squat structure Harold Finch now called home. At 74, Harold had the weathered face of a man who had spent most of his life peering into engine compartments, squinting against fumes and sparks. His hands, marked by decades of calluses, burns, and oil stains that no amount of scrubbing could remove, trembled slightly as he adjusted the environmental controls inside Gamma 14. The retired Earth mechanic leaned heavily on his bone cane, fashioned from the femur of a Centaurian mammoth beetle and a gift from his last employer, and surveyed his new kingdom. Not much. Is it Spike? He addressed the small cactus, sitting on what passed for a kitchen counter. The plant, his sole companion on this journey, remained stoically silent, as usual. But it's ours. No more clients. No more deadlines. No more, "This needs to be fixed yesterday, Finch." Harold straightened his 18-pocket vest, a mechanic's dream garment that he had modified and remodified over decades, and patted the worn fabric affectionately. Every pocket contained a tool, a spare part, or some trinket he couldn't bear to part with. In pocket number 12 was the deed to this place, an abandoned alien research station he had purchased for 25,000 credits, and a vintage carburetor from a 2087 Tesla Honda Hybrid. The real estate agent, a squid-like being with translucent skin, had been suspiciously eager to close the deal. Perfect retirement spot, it had burbled through its translator. Completely abandoned for 50 cycles. Previous owners never coming back. Self-sustaining power system. Great opportunity. Very peaceful. Peace was exactly what Harold wanted. After 53 years fixing everything from quantum propulsion drives to primitive internal combustion engines, he was tired. No family left on Earth or any of the colonies. No friends who hadn't drifted away during his workaholic decades. Just him, his tools. And now this isolated outpost on a desert planet, where he could live out his remaining years in solitude. "Computer, dim lights to 30%, Harold commanded, and the harsh illumination softened. The station's AI was rudimentary, but functional. Another selling point. He wouldn't have to bother with complicated upgrades or repairs. It would serve his basic needs until he eventually died here, alone and undisturbed, just as he planned. Harold made his way to the sleeping quarters, his cane tapping a rhythm on the metal floor. The bed, designed for a species with a very different anatomy, had been replaced with a standard human sleeping platform. Small comforts were important at his age. "Good night, Spike," he called to the cactus as he settled in for his first night in his final home. "Tomorrow we'll explore the rest of the station, all 3 rooms of it." He chuckled at his own joke before closing his eyes. Sleep came quickly in the cool, climate-controlled environment, so different from the scorching desert outside. Then came the noise. It started as a low hum, barely perceptible. Harold's eyes snapped open in the darkness. After decades working with machinery, his ears were attuned to the slightest mechanical anomaly. This wasn't the normal background noise of the environmental systems. The hum grew louder, accompanied by a series of clicks and whirs. Then, a deep vibration that Harold could feel through the bed frame. "Computer, lights full," he barked, reaching for his cane. The illumination revealed nothing unusual in his sleeping quarters, but the noises continued, now joined by what sounded like hydraulic systems, engaging somewhere deep within the station. "Computer, status report." "Initializing full systems activation," came the monotone response. "Awakening protocols engaged. Welcome home, researcher." "What? No, cancel that. I didn't authorize any." The floor beneath him shuddered. Dust that had accumulated in unseen corners began to float down from the ceiling. The entire station seemed to be waking up. Harold grabbed his vest, shrugging it on over his sleep clothes, and hobbled to the main control room as quickly as his aging legs would carry him. The displays that had been dormant or showing only basic information now flickered with streams of data in a script he couldn't read. "Computer, shut down all non-essential systems immediately." Unable to comply, recognition protocols initiated. "Please stand by." A mechanical whine came from the station's main entrance, a sound Harold recognized as airlock decompression. Someone was coming in. He reached into pocket 17 and pulled out a small plasma torch. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. Gripping his cane in one hand and the torch in the other, he faced the entrance. The inner door of the airlock slid open with a pneumatic hiss. In the doorway stood a figure unlike any Harold had encountered in his travels across 12 systems. Humanoid in general shape, but with skin that seemed to pulse with a soft blue bioluminescence. Large, almond-shaped eyes, completely black, dominated a face that was both alien and strangely beautiful. A shimmer of what looked like fine scales caught the light as the figure moved forward. "Who the hell are you?" Harold demanded, raising the plasma torch. "And what are you doing in my station?" The figure tilted its head, studying him with those bottomless eyes. Then, in perfect English, "Your station? How interesting. I believe there has been a misunderstanding." The voice was melodic, feminine, with an accent Harold couldn't place. "My name is Zella, and this is my research vessel. The real question is, who are you, and why have you activated my ship's awakening protocols?" Harold's mind raced. "Ship? This wasn't a station. I'm Harold Finch. I purchased the station, ship, legally. I have documentation." He patted pocket 12 with his cane hand. Zella moved further into the room, her movements fluid and graceful. She wore what appeared to be a form-fitting suit, made of a material that shifted colors slightly as she moved, from deep blue to purple and back again. "I highly doubt that," she said, a note of amusement in her voice. "This vessel is not for sale. It is a Zahonian research craft, and I placed it in hibernation mode approximately 1 local solar cycle ago. I returned to find it partially activated and inhabited." She looked around the space, noting Harold's few possessions. "By you." "Look, lady..." "Zella." "Look, Zella. I don't know what game you're playing, but I paid good money for this place. 25,000 credits and a classic carburetor to a licensed real estate agent. I have the deed right here." He awkwardly fished the document from his pocket and held it out. Zella approached, taking the thin metallic sheet from his hand. She examined it, her expression unreadable, before looking up at him. "This is not a valid deed. This is a standard atmospheric composition readout for Zerath, modified to look like a property transfer. You have been defrauded. Harold Finch." Harold felt his face flush with anger and embarrassment. "That squid-faced son of a..." "Indeed," Zella interrupted. "Cordalacs are notorious for such schemes. They identify abandoned technology, create false documentation, and sell to unsuspecting off-worlders." She handed the fake deed back to him. "However, this creates a problem for both of us. You have nowhere to go, and you have activated systems that were meant to remain dormant until my return." Harold lowered the plasma torch, suddenly feeling every one of his 74 years. "So what now? You throw an old man out into the desert?" Zella's luminescent skin pulsed briefly. "There are 2 options. The first is decontamination." "And what exactly does that entail?" "The removal of all foreign organisms from the vessel. It is not survivable for most carbon-based life forms." Harold tightened his grip on his cane. "And the second option? You appear to have some technical expertise, judging by your attire and tools. My ship has sustained damage that precipitated its emergency landing and hibernation. If you can assist in repairs, I would consider allowing you temporary residence until alternative arrangements can be made. So, fix your ship or be disintegrated." Not much of a choice. Zella's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Life rarely offers perfect choices. Harold Finch, what is your decision? Harold looked around at the place he had thought would be his final home. Then, back at the alien who now offered him a chance to continue his life's work, fixing things, or face certain death. Well, he sighed, I didn't bring all these tools just to die without using them. When do we start? The dawn of Zerath brought with it a heat that penetrated even the ship's insulated walls. Harold woke stiff and sore, his old bones protesting the night spent on an examination table that Zella had converted into a makeshift bed. The previous owner of his sleeping platform, a Zerathian sand beetle the size of a small dog, had been discovered and promptly evicted. Much to Harold's horror, he found Zella in what he now knew was the bridge, not a control room. She stood before a three-dimensional holographic display that showed what appeared to be the ship's schematics. Good, you're awake, she said without turning around. We have much to accomplish today. Harold rubbed his lower back, wincing. Got any coffee in this research vessel of yours? I am unfamiliar with this substance. Never mind. He shuffled closer to examine the display. So what's the damage? Zella manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a section near what Harold assumed was the engine compartment. The primary energetic conduit sustained microfractures during an encounter with a gravitic anomaly. Without a stable conduit, the drive core cannot maintain proper containment. Harold squinted at the display. In simple terms, the tube that holds the star is cracked. The star, Harold repeated flatly. As in, an actual star. A miniaturized version, yes. It is how Zahonian vessels generate power. A quantum-locked stellar fragment maintained in perpetual fusion through... Harold held up a hand. I get the picture. You've got a miniature sun in a bottle, and the bottle's cracked. He tugged at his ear, thinking. And I'm guessing this isn't something you can patch with standard sealant. Correct. The conduit requires precision repair at the molecular level. The ship's fabrication systems can create the necessary patch material, but applying it requires a steady hand and experience with delicate mechanical work. Harold patted pocket number 5, which contained his micro-manipulation tools. Well, that I've got in spades, but we'll need to reach this conduit first. Where exactly is it? Zella rotated the hologram. The majority of this vessel remains buried beneath the sand. What you believe to be a station is merely the upper observation dome and research module. The propulsion and power systems are approximately 30 meters below the surface. Harold's eyebrows shot up. You mean this whole thing is buried? How are we supposed to get down there? We walk, Zella said simply. The internal transport systems are offline due to the power containment issues, but the manual access corridors should be functional. I will need to reactivate certain dormant systems first. She moved to a console and placed her palm against it. The surface illuminated at her touch, and a series of symbols flowed across the screen. System. Recognize researcher Zella. Authorization sequence Gamma Epsilon 97. The ship's AI responded in a different voice than Harold had heard before, richer, more nuanced. Researcher Zella recognized, awaiting instructions. Initiate partial power to sections A through D. Maintain hibernation protocols for all research specimens. Activate manual access route to engineering. Acknowledged. Warning. Power fluctuations detected in stellar containment. Estimated stability duration. 14 standard hours before critical failure. Zella turned to Harold. We must work quickly. If the containment fails completely. Let me guess, Big Boom? The resulting explosion would vaporize everything within a 5-kilometer radius. Harold whistled low. Then we better get moving. Just let me grab Spike first. Spike? My cactus. Been with me for 20 years. Not leaving him behind. Zella's expression might have been confusion or amusement. Harold couldn't tell. Very well. Retrieve your plant companion. Meet me at the central chamber in 10 minutes. And wear protective gear if you have it. The lower levels may have environmental hazards. As Zella left, Harold shook his head. Hear that? Old bones. We're going to fix a star in a bottle. Just another day in retirement. The journey to the ship's buried sections proved more challenging than Harold had anticipated. With Spike safely nestled in Pocket 18 and his tool-laden vest securely fastened, he followed Zella through a series of corridors that seemed to shift and change as they progressed. Is it just me? Or are these passages getting smaller? He asked, as they squeezed through a particularly narrow section. The ship adapts to conserve energy, Zella explained. Corridors expand only as needed and contract when not in use. It's one of the many efficiency measures incorporated into Zahonian design. Efficient for who? Certainly not for humans with arthritic hips. Harold grumbled, but pressed on. They descended through what appeared to be emergency access tubes, climbing down ladders that Harold's knees protested with every rung. The temperature rose noticeably as they went deeper, and a faint, pulsing glow began to emanate from the walls themselves. Bioluminescent circuitry, Zella said, noticing Harold's curious glance. It responds to the ship's energy needs and provides emergency lighting when primary systems fail. After what felt like hours of descent, they emerged into a vast chamber that took Harold's breath away. Unlike the utilitarian spaces above, this room was a cathedral of technology. The ceiling arched high overhead, covered in what looked like a projection of a star field. The walls curved inward, meeting at a central column that pulsed with energy, bands of light flowing upward and disappearing into the ceiling. The drive core interface, Zella announced. From here, we can access the energetic conduit. Harold stared in wonder. This isn't like any engine room I've ever seen. It looks more like a stellar observation chamber. Yes, Zahonian technology merges the practical with the aesthetic. We believe that function need not sacrifice form. She approached a control pedestal near the central column. The damage is within the column itself. We'll need to open access panels and identify the exact location of the microfractures. Harold set down his cane and began examining the column, running his fingers lightly over its surface. What's this made of? Doesn't feel like any metal I know. It isn't metal. It's a crystalline composite that can withstand temperatures approaching those of a stellar core. The material is grown, not manufactured. Grown, Harold's eyebrows raised. Like a plant? More like a coral reef. It is seeded, and then develops according to specified parameters. Zella manipulated controls on the pedestal. I'm initiating the diagnostic sequence. It should reveal the exact locations of the fractures. The column's pulsing light changed pattern, sections darkening while others brightened. Then, a three-dimensional schematic appeared in the air before them, rotating slowly to show a web-like pattern of fine lines running through one section of the column. There, Zella pointed. The fractures are concentrated in the upper containment ring. If they spread to the lower rings, the containment field will collapse. Harold studied the schematic, mentally calculating the repair approach. We'll need to stabilize the existing fractures first, then reinforce the surrounding material. But how do we access the inside of that column? I don't see any panels or maintenance hatches. The column will recognize authorized personnel and create an access point. Zella placed her hand on the glowing surface. System, create maintenance access for Stellar Containment Ring Alpha. Nothing happened. Zella frowned. System, override. Emergency maintenance protocol. Still nothing. That's unusual, she said, a note of concern in her voice. The system should respond to my authorization. Harold watched her make several more attempts, each more urgent than the last, before clearing his throat. Mind if I try something? Zella stepped back, gesturing for him to proceed. By all means. Harold approached the column cautiously. Instead of speaking commands or placing his palm against it, as Zella had done, he simply rapped his knuckles against the surface, listening carefully to the resulting sound. "Hollow resonance," he muttered. "But there's a secondary vibration. Acoustic interference pattern." He moved around the column, tapping at different points and tilting his head to listen. Finally, he stopped and placed his ear directly against the surface. "There's a flow disruption right here," he announced. "The energy isn't moving smoothly through this section. That's consistent with a structural weakness." He straightened up and addressed the column directly. "System, this is maintenance. Requesting emergency access for critical repair. Authorization." He paused, then simply said, "Stubborn mechanic needs to fix your broken heart." To Zella's visible surprise, a seam appeared in the column's surface, widening into an oval-shaped opening, large enough for a person to step through. "How did you—" Zella began. Harold shrugged. "Old mechanic's trick. When the fancy authorization fails, try speaking the system's language. And what does any system with a problem want? Someone to fix it." Zella's skin pulsed with what Harold was beginning to recognize as amusement. "You are an unusual human, Harold Finch." "So I've been told." He peered into the opening. "Now, let's see what we're dealing with." Inside the column was a sight that defied Harold's extensive experience. Suspended in the center of a complex web of crystalline structures was what appeared to be a small star, no larger than a basketball, yet burning with the intensity of a sun. Its surface roiled with flares and prominences, casting a golden light that shifted and danced. Surrounding it was a series of concentric rings, each composed of the same crystalline material as the column itself. The uppermost ring showed visible damage, hairline fractures that glowed an angry red against the golden light. "Well, I'll be damned," Harold whispered. "You weren't kidding about the star in a bottle." "This is a stellar fragment," Zella explained, joining him at the opening. "Harvested from a white dwarf and stabilized through quantum locking. The containment rings maintain the gravitational and magnetic fields necessary to prevent it from either collapsing or expanding." Harold pointed to the damaged ring. "And those fractures are disrupting the field?" "Precisely. If the containment fails completely, the fragment will begin an uncontrolled expansion, essentially returning to its natural stellar state." "Which means boom," Harold concluded. "Big boom." "Yes, very big boom." Harold reached into his vest, retrieving a set of specialized micro-tools from various pockets. "I'll need to get closer to inspect the damage properly. Is there some kind of protection against the heat and radiation?" Zella moved to a nearby console. "The ship can generate a localized containment field around a repair technician. It won't last long, perhaps 30 minutes, but it should provide sufficient protection." 30 minutes to patch a star," Harold muttered. "No pressure." As Zella worked the controls, Harold prepared his tools, laying them out in precise order on a small magnetic pad from pocket number 7. His old hands moved with practiced efficiency, assembling a custom micro-welder that he had designed himself decades ago. "The personal containment field is ready," Zella announced. "Once activated, you'll be able to approach the damaged ring. The field will conform to your body and maintain a safe environment, but it will steadily degrade. The system will warn you when 5 minutes of protection remain." Harold nodded, tucking his assembled tools into easily accessible pockets. "And what about the repair material? You mentioned the ship could fabricate something suitable." Zella held up what looked like a small vial filled with shimmering liquid. "Crystalline nanopaste. It will bond molecularly with the existing ring material and harden to the same density. However, it must be applied with extreme precision. Too much in one area could unbalance the containment field." Harold took the vial, examining it carefully. "Like butter on a hot engine block. Got it." He looked up at Zella. "I assume you'll be guiding me through this." "I will monitor from here and communicate through the ship's internal systems." She hesitated, then added, "Harold Finch, I must emphasize the danger. If the containment field fails while you're inside..." "I know. I know." Instant vaporization. Harold waved off her concern. "Look, I'm 74 years old. I came to this planet expecting to die alone, in what I thought was an abandoned research station. Instead, I'm about to repair a miniature star. If that's how I go out. At least it's more interesting than drifting off in my sleep." Zella studied him for a moment, her alien features inscrutable. "Your species has a remarkable attitude toward mortality. We call it gallows humor. Helps us cope with the inevitable." Harold positioned himself at the column opening. "Now, let's get this show on the road. Activate the containment field." A shimmer of energy enveloped Harold, feeling like a second skin of cool water. He took a deep breath and stepped into the column. The heat was intense, even through the protective field. Harold could feel the power of the stellar fragment, not just its temperature, but a deep, thrumming energy that resonated in his bones. He moved carefully toward the damaged containment ring, using handholds that appeared in the crystalline structure as he approached. "Commencing analysis," he muttered, more to himself than to Zella. He removed a magnification device from pocket number 3 and held it up to the fractures. Multiple stress patterns. Looks like the initial crack propagated outward in a stellate pattern. Classic material fatigue under cyclical stress. "Can you repair it?" Zella's voice came through clearly, seemingly from the air around him. "Yes, but it's going to be tricky. The fractures are deeper than they appear on the surface. I'll need to inject the nanopaste into the core of the material, not just apply it topically." Harold retrieved a fine-tipped applicator from pocket number 9 and attached it to the vial of nanopaste. With steady hands, steadier than they had been in years, he noted with surprise, he began the delicate work of injecting the repair material into the microscopic cracks. "Fascinating approach," Zella commented as she watched his progress on her monitors. "Our technicians typically replace damaged components entirely." "That's the difference between mechanics and engineers," Harold replied, carefully filling another fracture. "Engineers replace, mechanics repair. Whole different philosophy." As he worked, Harold fell into the familiar rhythm that had defined his professional life. The focus required pushed away all other concerns: his age, his isolation, even the danger of his current position. There was only the problem before him and the solution in his hands. Time slipped away until a warning chime brought him back to awareness. 5 minutes of containment field integrity remaining, the ship's system announced. Harold assessed his progress. He had repaired the majority of the fractures, but several critical ones remained. "Not enough time," he muttered. "You must exit now," Zella urged. "We can recharge the field and continue later." "No time for that either," Harold countered. "These remaining fractures are in the primary stress junction. If they're not sealed, the others will refracture within hours. But if the field fails while you're still inside, then I'd better work faster, hadn't I?" Harold increased his pace, hands moving with practiced precision despite the urgency. "Just keep an eye on the containment readings. Let me know if anything changes." The warning chime sounded again. 2 minutes remaining. Harold ignored it, focusing on the largest remaining fracture. The nanopaste flowed into the crack, glowing briefly as it bonded with the surrounding material. 1 down, 2 to go. 1 minute remaining. The second fracture was deeper, requiring more paste and more careful application. Harold could feel sweat beading on his forehead, evaporating almost instantly in the intense heat. 30 seconds. Just one more fracture, the most critical one, at the junction where 3 stress lines converged. Harold positioned the applicator and began to inject the nanopaste, watching as it flowed into the damaged area. 10 seconds. 9, 8. Almost there. Harold gritted through clenched teeth. 7, 6, 5. The paste filled the crack, beginning to glow as it bonded. 4, 3. Harold withdrew the applicator, watching the material harden. 2, 1. Done! Harold shouted, already turning toward the exit. Containment field failure imminent. He lunged for the opening, feeling the protective field flickering around him. The cool sensation gave way to searing heat that penetrated his clothing. With a final, desperate effort, he threw himself through the column opening, landing heavily on the chamber floor outside. The column sealed itself immediately behind him. Harold lay on his back, gasping for breath. His skin reddened from the heat, but otherwise intact. Zella knelt beside him, her luminescent skin pulsing with what might have been concern. "Are you injured?" Harold coughed, then managed a weak chuckle. "Nothing a cold drink wouldn't fix." He attempted to sit up, grimacing as his old bones protested. "Did it work?" Zella helped him to a sitting position, then checked the readouts on the nearby console. "The containment field is stabilizing. Energy flow patterns are returning to normal parameters." She looked back at him, her alien features forming what Harold interpreted as a smile. "It worked. Harold Finch. You have repaired what our finest technicians would have simply replaced." As if in confirmation, the central column's pulsing light steadied, the erratic patterns giving way to a smooth, rhythmic flow. The starfield projection overhead brightened, stars twinkling with renewed clarity. Then, unexpectedly, the ship's AI spoke. "Repair successfully completed. Thank you, stubborn mechanic." Harold blinked in surprise, then burst into laughter. A full, hearty laugh that echoed in the vast chamber. "Well, I'll be damned." It remembered. Zella helped him to his feet, retrieving his cane. "The ship's AI adapted to your unique approach. It has accepted you." Harold leaned on his cane, suddenly feeling every one of his years. "So, what now? Do I get tossed out into the desert? Or is the decontamination still on the table?" Zella's skin pulsed with colors Harold hadn't seen before, shifting patterns of blue and violet that reminded him of Earth's northern lights. "Neither. You have proven yourself valuable, Harold Finch. More than valuable. You have demonstrated an approach to problem-solving that my culture has perhaps overlooked in our pursuit of advancement." She gestured to the now stable column. "Where we would discard and replace, you preserved and repaired. There is wisdom in that approach." Harold shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing what I've always done. Nothing special about it." "I disagree." Zella moved to another console, activating a new display. "I would like to propose an alternative arrangement. This vessel's mission is to study this planet and its unique properties. I require assistance, not just with repairs, but with the collection and analysis of specimens. Would you consider becoming my research assistant?" Harold stared at her. "Me? A research assistant? I'm a mechanic, not a scientist." "You are observant, methodical, and possess manual skills that complement my analytical abilities. You also have a perspective different from my own, a valuable asset in scientific endeavor." She tilted her head, studying him. "And you have nowhere else to go." That last point was undeniably true. Harold considered the offer, looking around at the magnificent chamber. It was certainly more interesting than the 3 small rooms he had thought would be his final home. What exactly would this job entail? Maintenance of the vessel systems, assistance with specimen collection and preservation, operation of certain research equipment. In exchange, you would have comfortable living quarters, access to ship resources, and purpose. Harold Finch. Something beyond waiting to die. The words struck deeper than Harold expected. He had come to Zerath to find isolation, to fade away quietly. But standing here, surrounded by alien technology, he had just helped repair. He felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Pride, satisfaction, usefulness. "Well," he said finally, "I suppose Spike and I could stick around for a while." At least until you find someone better qualified. Zella's skin pulsed with what Harold was now certain was pleasure. Excellent. Then let us formalize our arrangement. She moved to a recessed alcove in the wall, which opened to reveal what looked like a small bar. From it, she retrieved 2 crystalline containers and a bottle filled with luminescent liquid. This is stellar bloom, she explained, pouring the glowing liquid into the containers. A traditional beverage among my people, shared to mark new partnerships. She handed one of the containers to Harold, who examined it curiously. The liquid inside shifted and swirled with colors similar to those he had seen in Zella's skin. To cooperation, Zella said, raising her container. Harold raised his own in response. To fixing things instead of replacing them. They drank. The liquid tasted unlike anything Harold had experienced, somehow combining the warmth of fine whiskey, the refreshing quality of spring water, and something else entirely alien, yet pleasurable. Not bad, he admitted. Better than the engine coolant they serve at the spaceport bars. Zella set her empty container down. Now, we should return to the upper levels. With the power core stabilized, we can begin awakening the ship's other systems. There is much to show you. As they made their way back through the corridors, which seemed to expand more generously for their return journey, Harold found himself contemplating the strange turn his retirement had taken. He had come to Zerath, seeking an ending, only to stumble into a new beginning. So, he said as they ascended, once everything's up and running, what's the first order of business for this research mission? The excavation, Zella replied. This vessel is primarily buried beneath sand accumulated over the past solar cycle. We must uncover it completely to access all research modules and deploy the collection drones. Excavation, Harold's eyebrows rose. You mean we're going to dig this entire ship out of the desert? Precisely. The process will take approximately 2 local weeks, even with the ship's automated systems. Harold chuckled. And here I thought retirement would be boring. I assure you, Harold Finch, boredom will not be a concern. Zella's voice held what might have been humor. The real question is whether your human lifespan will be sufficient for all the work ahead. Is that a challenge? Harold asked, his old competitive spirit stirring. Perhaps. My species lives considerably longer than yours. Well then, Harold patted his 18-pocket vest, feeling the familiar weight of his tools. I'd better stick around as long as possible. Someone has to keep this ship running properly. As they emerged into the upper level, what Harold had initially thought was the entire station, the desert suns of Zerath were setting, casting long shadows across the red arc sand. Through the observation dome, the vast emptiness that had once appealed to Harold's desire for isolation now seemed like a canvas of possibility. In Pocket 18, Spike the cactus had sprouted a tiny pink flower, the first in years. Would you look at that? Harold murmured, carefully removing the plant from his pocket. Seems like someone else approves of our new arrangement. Zella examined the small bloom with scientific curiosity. Your plant companion has remarkable timing. Perhaps it too senses the change in energy now that the ship is awakening. Or maybe, Harold suggested with a smile, he just needed something worth sticking around for, like his stubborn old owner. As night fell over the desert planet, lights began to illuminate throughout the ship, systems coming online, research equipment initializing, corridors expanding to their full dimensions. What had seemed like a small, abandoned outpost was revealing itself to be a vast complex of technology and purpose. Harold Finch, retired mechanic, stood at the observation window with his alien employer, watching as automatic systems began to clear away the sand from the buried sections of the vessel. His retirement had taken an unexpected turn, but as he felt the familiar weight of tools in his many pockets, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Computer, he said experimentally. Status report. The AI responded immediately, its voice somehow warmer than before. All primary systems functional. Stellar containment stable. Excavation process initiated. Good evening, stubborn mechanic. Harold grinned. Good evening to you too. Looks like we've got work to do tomorrow. And for the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to it.